Open the Pinnacle control software and wait for the ready status in the lower left corner of the window. Once the Pinnacle and the Pinnacle control software are connected, select empty pumps to remove any reagent left in the pumps and zero out the pressure transducer. Once the pumps are empty, prepare the Pinnacle for a seal change by selecting Change Seal in the Maintenance section of the Instrument drop-down menu. Make sure to follow the on-screen instructions for the Pinnacle control software. The Pinnacle will now flush out the pumps with flush solution from port 5 of the valve. Move the piston wash tube and the pump flush tubes to the top of their bottles so they are not submerged in piston wash or pump flush solution. Click Continue after this is done. The pump will fill with air through the pump flush lines, and it will dispense piston wash solution back into the piston wash bottle. The pumps and valves are now ready for seal change. Close the Pinnacle software. Turn off and disconnect the power to the Pinnacle. Then remove the right side cover to access the pumps. Close the valve at the top of the reagent bottle to prevent any siphoning down the reagent line to the pump. Remove the piston wash tubing from the piston wash port of the reagent pumps and let any excess piston wash solution drain into a paper towel. Next, remove the pump connections to the control board. Completely remove all tubing connections to the pump and valve. You may need to use needle nose pliers to loosen the nuts. Place a paper towel underneath the pump and valve to absorb any excess flush solution. Use a long 5/32 inch hex driver to remove the 3 screws holding the pump to the chassis. For pump 1, tilt the back end up and remove the pump in a vertical position. For pump 2, tilt the back end down and remove in a vertical position. Use a 1/8 inch hex driver to loosen the set screw at the front of the pump bracket. You do not need to completely remove the set screw. Use a 3/16 inch hex driver to completely remove the 2 cap screws that hold the pump bracket to the pump body. Place a thick paper towel under the pump body to absorb any excess flush solution still in the cylinder. Pull the cylinder off by twisting in a clockwise motion. Completely remove the brass-tipped set screw with a 1/16 inch hex driver. Do not reuse the brass-tipped set screw. Remove the pump head by twisting in a counterclockwise motion. Completely remove the piston wash connector. This will unlock the piston O-ring guide, and you can now turn the lead screw until you are able to pull off the piston O-ring guide. Using a 3/32 inch hex driver, completely remove the 3 nuts and washers holding the peak piston head to the metal piston face. Do not reuse these 3 screws and washers. Dispose of the old O-rings and screws used inside the pump. Place the metal piston face, ceramic cylinder, pump cap, peak piston head, piston O-ring guide, piston wash connector, new seals, and screws into a clean beaker. Fill with warm water and a few drops of liquid dish soap. Place in an ultrasonicating bath for at least 30 minutes to remove grease and dirt. Afterwards, thoroughly rinse all sonicated parts with DI water. Use a Phillips head screwdriver to remove the two screws that hold on the belt cover and then inspect the belt for any fraying or cracking. Turn the lead screw until it is fully extended and then install the belt cover. Assemble the piston head by placing the cleaned O-ring onto the peak piston head, and then place the metal piston face on top. The peak piston head and the metal piston face will snap together. Line up the 3 holes and install the new screws and washers. Do not over-tighten the 3 screws. You do not want to strip out the threads of the peak piston head. Place the clean piston rod O-ring into the piston O-ring guide. Lubricate the piston rod O-ring with some methanol and then slide the piston O-ring guide onto the lead screw all the way into the pump body. Screw in the piston wash connector to lock the piston O-ring guide in place. Now place the secondary cylinder O-ring into the groove of the piston O-ring guide. Screw on the newly assembled piston head. Next, screw in a new brass-tipped set screw into the piston head. Make this very tight. The brass tip will form to the threads of the lead screw. Never reuse the brass-tipped set screw. Lubricate the piston head with methanol and then push the ceramic cylinder back onto the pump body while turning in a clockwise motion. Line up the through holes so they are on top and bottom. Take care to only turn in a clockwise direction. Place the pump cap onto the front of the ceramic cylinder, followed by the pump bracket. Secure the pump bracket to the pump body with the 2 side shoulder screws. Tighten the set screw at the top of the bracket to push all the parts against the pump body. Use a 3/32" hex driver to remove the valve indicator plate. Use a flathead screwdriver to remove the two cap screws that secure the valve face to the valve motor. Now pull the valve face completely off. If there was a major valve leak and you cannot remove the valve face due to crystal buildup, install jack screws to gently remove the valve face. Use a 5/32" hex driver to screw in the jack screws. Tighten each jack screw with equal turns until the valve face comes off. Push the back of the valve insert with your thumb while turning with the valve tool to remove the valve insert. Squeeze the valve insert O-ring and then roll it off with your thumb. Repeat for the second valve insert O-ring. Use a piece of 1/16" OD PEEK tubing to remove the 5 small O-rings. Do not use any sharp tools, as this will scratch the soft white plastic of the valve. Place the valve face and insert along with a set of new valve seals into a clean beaker. Fill with warm water and a few drops of liquid dish soap. Place in an ultrasonicating bath for at least 30 minutes. Afterwards, thoroughly rinse all sonicated parts with DI water. Dispose and never reuse old valve O-rings. You can now install the pumps while the valve components are being sonicated. The Pinnacle chassis has two brackets that go into the slots of the pump body. Place the pump back inside the Pinnacle and make sure the pump is set onto the two brackets. If the pump is in the correct position, you will not be able to move the pump back and forth. Secure the pump to the chassis with the 3 screws. Next, reconnect the piston wash tube to the piston wash connector. Plug in the pump wires to the control board. Rinse the valve with some methanol and wipe away any debris with a lint-free tissue. Next, push in the 5 small O-rings with your fingers. Slide on the 2 valve insert O-rings. Use the valve tool to push the valve insert into the valve face. The valve tool will make sure the valve insert is flush with the valve face. Line up the prongs of the valve motor with the valve insert, and then slide the valve onto the prongs. Turn the valve so port 1 is at the top, and then push the valve face all the way back onto the valve motor. Screw in the 2 shoulder screws to secure the valve face to the valve motor. Be careful not to over-tighten the 2 shoulder screws, as these can break easily. Screw on the valve indicator plate to the valve face. Remove the tubing connections to the mixing tees so you can replace the 10 micron filters. Use a 7/16 inch wrench to remove the 10 micron filter from the mixing tee. Replace the filter with a new one by screwing in the new filter finger tight, and then use the 7/16 inch wrench to tighten a quarter turn. Reconnect the lines to the valve and pump. Tighten with needle nose pliers. Fill the reagent bottles, pump flush bottle, and piston wash bottle with 80/20 water methanol. Exercise the pump and valve seals by completely refilling and emptying both pumps. Select Refill both pumps and wait for this function to complete before selecting Empty both pumps. Make sure you do not have a sequence loaded. Completely refill and empty the reagent pumps a total of 5 times before attempting the pressure tests. Perform a pump and valve seal pressure test after exercising the new pump and valve seals. Follow the on-screen instructions. The pump and valve seal pressure test can be found in the Maintenance section of the Instrument drop-down menu. Remove the analytical column and replace it with a blocked union or a plug in the mixing tees. This will prevent any backflow onto the analytical column. Click Continue when this is complete. The pumps and valves will be flushed with flush solution before the pumps completely fill with pump flush solution. The valves will then turn to the blocked position and the Pinnacle will pressurize the pumps. The pressure will equilibrate for 10 minutes before taking the first pressure reading. The second pressure reading is taken after 10 minutes. The test will fail if the pressure drops more than 50 psi in 10 minutes. Look for leaks by wiping a lint-free tissue by each nut on the valve, pump, and pressure transducer. Remove the waste lines from the waste bottle and look for any liquid coming out of the waste lines. If there is a small leak from one of the 5 small O-rings in the valve, it will leak out of port 6 to the waste. When the pressure test is done, you will have the option to print the results and then the pumps will empty to the waste. If the pump and valve seal pressure test fails, exercise the pump and valve seals 5 more times and try the pressure test again. After the pump and valve seal pressure test has successfully passed, you can perform the system pressure test, which will test the integrity of the heated reactor and tubing to the mixing tees.